him to.
Oh yeah, no, we'll do the music. Don't worry. Right, I'm just setting it recording, and
Okay,
I'm just
okay.
gonna share us on Facebook, and then we can get started.
Okay.
So we must say congratulations to George. George has lost a stone.
Wow.
Yeah,
Ooh,
Yeah,
about a stone in weight.
Wow. Well done.
very good. If only I had willpower. Pardon.
It's the
Yeah.
need to put down a patio.
Eat off a small plate. Oh, eat off a small plate.
I used to have a small plate. You just put lots of food on it when I come round.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's all ready for you when you're
I
there.
know. We're nearly there, and then we'll get started.
Yeah.
Here we go. So we are now live on Facebook, and we are recording. So hopefully, everyone out there, thank you for joining us. I'm Tony Higginson. I'm joined at most weeks, if not every week, by my friend George Cunningham, whose brainchild to do these book-related, culture-related Zooms was indeed George's. So hello, George.
Hello, Tony.
Well, we must say thanks because, sometimes good ideas are what make things happen, and obviously we were all struggling away in lockdown, weren't we? And, sort of maybe doing Zooms for work and the odd one to friends and whatever, and you and Julie suddenly said, why don't we do something like this for, we can all join in, ask other people to come and tell us about their book or what they've been up to culturally. And it's been going great, hasn't it? We've been having a good time.
It has.
I've been enjoying all. I've enjoyed everyone.
Yeah, and also, yes, as you can hear if you're listening in, my good friend Brian Gibson, who is a legend that he's been around since Shakespeare's day, but I'm not convinced.
Oh, I have. Oh, I have.
Well, he certainly says he's friends with Anthony Hopkins, which puts him at a certain age. Yeah, so you were talking to Anthony Hopkins doing some Shakespeare last night, Brian.
Well, I wasn't talking to him, but I was watching him. He was on Facebook, and he's got his own little site.
I don't think he knew he was going to win an Oscar, did he?
I shouldn't imagine. He's a very humble guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Very
What we're
first
going to
film.
do just before we get started on the actual presentation, my friend Alban has put together a little slideshow about the 7 ages of Shakespeare. But because we were talking about Anthony Hopkins and Shakespeare and Hannibal, I'm just going to quickly share my screen for a minute and play you a little bit of music from the film Hannibal. Did you hear a little bit, or has it gone off again?
Oh, yeah, it went off, but I did hear.
I someone's trying to send me a message. Let's. So that was Salve Regina, which is basically Hail Mother, and that was used in, I think, the scene in Hannibal where he's eating the brain of his guest.
Oh, tasty.
Yeah, have you seen the film, George?
I have. I've seen all the films. Read all
But I
the
mean,
books.
I think Handel composed that a few hundred years ago. But I mean, isn't that sort of music just beautiful?
Beautiful.
Yeah. So if your Julie was here, she could have sung along because she does that sort of stuff, doesn't she? She certainly used to. She certainly used to. I think we don't sometimes forget, because we listen to so much contemporary music or 20th century music, that there's some stuff that's been around for 300, 400, 500 years that is just as good, if not better. So it's nice to have a little bit of classical music there. That was the Tallis Scholars with their version of Handel's Salve Regina. And where were you saying you'd heard that, Alban, before you start the presentation?
The Salve Regina, that probably a little later on in that, is what they sing in Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet when they're about to get married, and it's a really moving film, as I'm going to try and convince people.
Well, it's the film that got you. You fell in love with a character
Olivia
from Shakespeare.
Hussey. Absolutely.
Who won the Golden Globe along with her co-star, didn't she?
Yeah.
Back in 68, 69, somewhere around there.
It's impossible to believe, I know, but that was my O-level year in 68, 69.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
I must have taken my O-levels when I was 3.
George and I weren't even born, were we, George?
Yeah, I'm afraid I was.
We were probably playing in sandpits, weren't we?
I was 42.
Oh, it's frightening, isn't it? But no, isn't it nice to have an actual memory of something that got you into something like that?
Absolutely.
And at the time, it was. I think it was the last film to gross a certain amount based. It made $30 million, which in modern terms is like, £500 million. It was a huge film back in the day, wasn't it?
I mean, musically and beautifully choreographed, beautifully acted, and of course it had Olivia Hussey, who I think was at the time was a 15-year-old.
Yeah,
it was filmed, and she had a boyfriend who was Leonard Whiting, and he played Romeo. And I'd done that for O level, and they didn't normally take us out of school, but they took us to a real cinema to watch it. Now, that stayed with me. I mean, I didn't really catch on to Shakespeare till afterwards, but I kept on going back to that because I fell in love with it.
Well, isn't that a wonderful thing? I mean, I see. When I was at school, I was only a year or so behind you, George. We went to Theatre Clwyd to see Shakespeare. So they must have brought it in the year after you did O levels.
I think so.
Because I still did O levels. GCSEs came a bit later, didn't they? But yeah, we went to Theatre Clwyd to see Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream and Twelfth Night. We saw a few. Because obviously it's only near Wrexham, isn't it? So it's only an hour away.
I used to take school groups there.
Yeah.
And down to Stratford and everything.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that I think that's what schools should be doing. Yeah. It's taking kids to either the Playhouse in Liverpool or where you saw some up in Preston, Alban, didn't you? You done some plays up in Preston, haven't you?
Well, I did two what are called the Shakespeare festivals plays. One, Romeo and Juliet, first of all, which we did in Manchester, and then The Tempest, which we did in Preston, and performed it in a professional theatre there. Yeah, and it was lovely. I mean, by that stage, I was very much into my Shakespeare, and I was exploring ways of teaching it, which involved standing on your feet and starting it young, and we did two performances. Yeah.
Right, so that will come in some way through the little presentation you put together. Yeah. So if you're watching us on Facebook, hello folks, Alban's going to be sharing his screen in a minute, and he's going to take us through a little bit of a background of who Shakespeare was and where he came from, and a bit of family history, really, all of the sort of things that are quite good fun to know, really. And we're going to whiz through his life, some funny bits, some interesting bits, a couple of sidelines, a bit of music we're going to play along the way, and I think Alban, if he's feeling brave, might even read a sonnet and a soliloquy or two as he goes.
Try and stop me.
I know. Well, I think it's great to see and hear people performing something that they love doing, isn't it? Yeah. So you'll have to call your screen up again, mate. So here we go. Oh, here we are. So, welcome in, folks. 26th of April, 2021, a Shakespeare Unbarred. And 26th of April, Alban, is quite a good date for this because technically, we all celebrate Shakespeare's birthday on St. George's Day, April the 23rd. But, as you're about to tell us in a minute, 26th of April's probably the day we should really go with, isn't it?
That's the day he was baptized, and we just work back and guess it must be 23rd of April that he was born on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why in a minute, if you like.
Right, so folks, if we all just mute ourselves for a bit so Alban can rattle through the first few slides. So welcome in Harry down at the bottom, and Brian and I, if we mute ourselves, and let's let Alban crack on with the first part of the talk. Over to you, mate.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome to this talk on Big Bill Shakespeare, whose birth and death day was celebrated on April 23rd, which was last Friday. He's 457 years old, so wish him happy birthday. And arguably the English-speaking world's greatest living playwright, you could say. I've called this Shakespeare's Unbarred because I like a good pun, or very often a very bad one. It means that I can start by telling the old joke about Shakespeare being thrown out of a pub, hence the Alan Sugar from Dragon's Den shouting "You're barred" down below. But it's not the only joke associated with Shakespeare. There's that famous quotation, "Now is the winter of our discontent, may glorious summer by the son of York," from Richard III, and the camping shop, which played on that by having "now is the summer of our discount tents," which I rather like. If you look for Shakespeare's own humour, the puns don't really carry as well as they might do. So things like "ask for me tomorrow and you'll find me a grave man," because Mercutio's just dying at the time, he's just been stabbed, doesn't really work. But Shakespeare's plays can be very funny because there's lots of opportunity for slapstick there. But let's see who we're going to talk about. I want to talk about this guy. That's the picture most people recognise. It's about William Shakespeare. That's on the 1623 First Folio, and a picture of a bald man who looks like he's got his head on a dinner plate. That's because they used a printer who wasn't particularly good at it. Or it could be Joseph Fiennes in Shakespeare in Love, you remember, or even David Mitchell in Upstart Crow, or the 3D version of the Death Mask. It's still, the jury's out whether it is a death mask or not, but Dundee University came up with that one. Or there's this famous Chandos portrait, as it's called, which belonged to the Dukes of Chandos before it was donated to the National Portrait Gallery in 1856, and it was the first acquisition of the National Portrait Gallery. Note the earring, by the way, which denotes a bohemian lifestyle, which it then is now, and the loose ties around the neck is emblematic of a poet. Or there's this one, which is the Cobb portrait, more recently discovered, found in an Anglo-Irish Dublin family, a portrait which belonged to Sir Henry Wriothesley, the Earl of Southampton, to whom it was thought to belong and whom we know Shakespeare had a relationship. Or a portrait from a more recent film, Romeo and Juliet, with a gnome that sat on his head. But there's the funeral bust in Holy Trinity Church, Stratford. And this is the one where people think he looks like a self-satisfied pork butcher. So we're going to talk about Bill Shakespeare. We're not going to talk about, start by saying it wasn't him, as some people did. You may remember from 2011, there was a film came out called Anonymous, and it claimed that it was his plays were written by Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, but it's been soundly battered into submission by Shakespeare scholars like Stanley Wells and Paul Edmondson, and the American James Shapiro, who wrote the book A Contested Will, who I met and embarrassed myself, Will, but I'll perhaps mention that later. But just look at the three of the big contenders to say who it's not. It's not Christopher Marlowe. He was born the same year as Shakespeare. Wrote some pretty good plays, Dr. Faustus, but he died too soon. Most of Shakespeare's best plays were written after 1593, and Marlowe didn't do women characters very well. Shakespeare could. Marlowe was killed by being stabbed in the eye, supposedly in a pub brawl in an argument over the bill, a great reckoning in a little room, as it was described in the inquest reports and echoed by Shakespeare in As You Like It, but more than likely assassinated on the orders of William Cecil, the Queen's advisor, spy master and boot boy. Elizabethan England was something of a police state. So it wasn't Christopher Marlowe. It wasn't Edward de Vere. The film Anonymous claims it was Edward de Vere. He again died too soon. He died in 1604, long before the great plays like Macbeth and Othello and King Lear were written. He also had his own troupe of players, Oxford's Men, and Shakespeare's plays were performed by the Lord Chamberlains and the King's Men. So why would he write plays for them? So it made a good film. What about Francis Bacon, the third contender? Now, he's got a great name, first of all. Not only Bacon, but it's also Viscount St. Albans, which I think is a fantastic name. And his dates work, doesn't he? He died in 1626. He was one of the cleverest men of his age. And he had, as I said, he had a great name. Sadly, though, what he did write was awful. One Russian critic describes it as elephantine. It's like comparing the poems of Pushkin with a speech by Leonid Brezhnev on tractor production in the Urals. The claim was backed by lots of secret ciphers found in Shakespeare's work and was promoted by an American distant ancestor, Delia Bacon, who went mad. Another one who went mad, a scholar called Thomas Looney, actually favoured the Earl of Oxford. So it's none of those. It's actually Big Bill Shakespeare of Stratford, who we're going to talk about. And it's called The Seven Ages of Shakespeare, because he wrote this account of 7 ages in a person's life in As You Like It, beginning from the infant mewling and puking. Yes, Shakespeare did give us the first use of the word puke. Onto the second childishness of extreme old age. So I'm going to give you Shakespeare in 7 bite-sized, but hopefully chewable and manageable chunks. Okay, so the first thing is, where does it start? This is Shakespeare's house in Stratford-upon-Avon. It was nearly bought by Phineas T. Barnum, the great entrepreneur, to be put on the back of a wagon and driven around America. But it was saved for the nation by money raised by, among others, Charles Dickens, who was a big Shakespeare fan. Shakespeare was born and died on the same day, April the 23rd, 1564, to April the 23rd, 1616. He died when he was 52. Or at least we think he was born on the 23rd. We only have the baptismal record showing that he was baptized on the 26th of April today. And looking at the same church records, it becomes clear that his greatest achievement was not writing his plays, but surviving at all, because he was born in a plague year, hence the rat in the top corner. The 23rd now was a Sunday, and baptism was usually 2 days later, because if you didn't get baptized within 5 days, you went to hell. But the next day was a Sunday, so you couldn't be baptized then. And the day after was St. Mark's Day, which was thought to be unlucky. So he was baptized on the 26th. That's according to the Julian calendar. So really, if we take the Gregorian calendar, we should be celebrating him on May the 3rd. This is where he's born, Shakespeare's house in Stratford. And I told you the story of Phineas T. Barnum. It's a lovely place to visit even today. Okay, so that's the first of the 7 ages where he was born. The second concerns his father. His father was John from the village called Snitterfield. He's the Bard of Avon. Had Shakespeare's father not moved to Stratford and stayed in Snitterfield, he would have been the Bard of Snitterfield rather than the Bard of Avon, which doesn't sound too good, does it? His father John was a glove maker or a widower, dealing in whitening of leather in Stratford. A widower bought animal skin from butchers and prepared it for glove making. So there are several references which show an inside knowledge of glove making in Shakespeare's plays. So in Henry VIII, for example, you've got Anne Boleyn's conscience is compared to kid skin, cheverel, which is particularly stretchy. She has a cheverel conscience, one that will be easily stretched like cheverel or kid leather. And there's another reference to wit being like that in Romeo and Juliet. It would have been quite smelly work and a smelly place to live, as vats of urine and animal dung would be surrounding them as it was used for tanning the leather. And funnily enough, the first time Shakespeare's name is mentioned in the historical record is in 1552. And that's because there was an unauthorized midden, a dung heap, in the middle of Henley Street that his father had left there, presumably because it was used for his tanning industry, and it smelt a fair bit, and it was found a shilling. But he did quite well for himself, did John Shakespeare. He prospered. He became an ale taster, an alderman, a bailiff, a justice of the peace, and a member of the town council. He was responsible for whitewashing over the religious pictures in the Guildhall Chapel, which you see in one of the pictures there, following the harsher religious rules of Elizabeth's reign. Some speculation is he only did it lightly because he was hedging his bets, and he may have been a secret recusant, a secret Catholic himself. His downfall came, though, because on the side, he was also what was called a brogger, and a brogger is an illegal dealer in wool. And he was forced to leave the town council because of that, in some sort of disgrace. Trading in wool was very lucrative in Tudor times. Many made vast fortunes. You see on the top right-hand corner there, there's a picture of a tombstone in Bourton-on-the-Water in the Cotswolds from a very rich wool merchant. Laws were passed to ensure wool was used. Working men, if you were a working man in Tudor times, you'd have to wear a daft woolen hat like the one in the picture below. And you'd also have to be buried in a woolen shroud, all to keep the woolen industry going. So we've seen where he's born, we've seen his dad. Let's move on to the third stage in his life. That's his mother. Now, his mother was Mary Arden. And she came up from a family who were farming at nearby Wilmcote, and she was relatively well off. In the days when I used to take busloads of Year 9 teenagers to Mary Arden's house and let them loose on the town, and then we'd meet up again if they'd been good and had some free time, and then go and see a play. We used to take people to Mary Arden's farmhouse, that beautiful building, a Tudor building with its brown and white wattle and daub walls, and they treated them wonderfully. They'd sit on benches, they'd sit by the fire, they'd sit on the floor, and they'd hear tales of Tudor family life, and things like the rule of thumb being you could only beat your wife with a stick which is smaller than your thumb. It was a lovely place to visit. Sadly, though, in 2002, so I did it for 10 years, and in 2002, they suddenly discovered that actually they got the wrong house, and that Mary Arden's house was the smaller one, Farmer Palmer's house instead, which is in the same grounds. Nevertheless, if you go to Stratford, go to Wilmcote, lovely place to visit. The Ardens were a lot better off than the Shakespeares. In fact, John Shakespeare's father was a tenant of the Ardens, and she came from a very old Warwickshire family which had distant relatives in the north. The Ardens of Parkhall, Castle Bromwich, for example. William Arden was Mary Arden's second cousin. And in 1583, John Somerville was the husband of William Arden's granddaughter, so a distant relative of Shakespeare, was arrested on his way to assassinate Queen Elizabeth. On his way down to London, he happened to mention what he intended to do in practically every pub he went in, and told everyone he met. And he was subsequently arrested, armed with a pistol. He was put to the rack before being strangled in his cell by his fellow prisoners, either because he was mad and annoying them, or to stop him singing like a canary and implicating any more. But we've mentioned that John and Mary Arden had William, their eldest son. But the question is often asked, what about Shakespeare's sister? And don't just mean Bananarama. The family of Shakespeare, seen here at the top of the pots, by the way, in 1992, Shakespeare did have one sister who survived into adulthood called Joan. Now, if you've read Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is a fantastic book, you might realize that Joan is the mother of Anne Hathaway. and the sister is called Eliza, and that's because she changed the names because she didn't like too many Jones. But Joan lived to a ripe old age and didn't die till she was 77. He also had a sister Anne, who died when she was 7, and 2 others who died in infancy. And he also had 3 brothers: Gilbert, Richard, and Edmund. And William was the eldest. And perhaps this might not be this might be a good opportunity to listen to.
I think I was just about to say that. Should we cunningly play "Stay" by Shakespeare's Sister, because it's a cracking song anyway, isn't it?
Can I leave my screen on? Or
no, I'll just counter over yours, and then we'll come back to yours in a minute, mate.
Right.
So,
okay.
Where's it gone? There we are.
If this world is wearing thin and you're thinking of escape, I'll go anywhere with you. Just wrap me up in chains. But if you try to go alone, don't think I'll understand. Stay with me. Stay with me. In the silence of your room, in the darkness of your dream, you must only think of me. There can be no in between. When your pride is on the floor, I'll make you beg for more. Stay with me. Stay with me. You'd better hope and pray that you make it safe back to your own world. You'd better hope and pray that you'll wake one day in your own world. 'Cause when you sleep at night.
So the wonderful Marcella Detroit and I think it was Karen from Bananarama, wasn't it? George is nodding. George and I probably were Bananarama fans back in the day. I think we were. We had taste back then, didn't we? Oh dear. George is nodding away there. So Alban, yeah, if you want to bring up your share screen back again, and we'll move on for the next bit. Didn't one of his brothers get him into trouble as well? Am I remembering? Edmund, was it? Did he not?
Edmund was the one who followed him to London, and he died in London. Is buried in Southwark Cathedral, and Shakespeare paid for the burial and for the bell to be rung. The other 2 we don't know a lot about. Richard and Gilbert, we don't know a lot about them. We presume they took over the family's business. The one that you're perhaps thinking about is Thomas Quinney.
Yeah.
Married Judith, his sister.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a bit of a bad lad because he got a girl pregnant and she died in childbirth. And by that stage, he'd married Judith. Shakespeare thereafter cut Judith out of the will. And we'll come to Judith because it's a bit of a sad story, really. She's a star character in the book by Maggie O'Farrell, Hamnet, because she was the twin, of course. But later life was quite sad.
You should, yeah, you're back on screen.
There we go. Shall I carry on?
Yes, please do.
Right. So Shakespeare, we assume, went to the local grammar school from about the age of 7 or 8 until 16. It's now open to visitors, and again, it's one of the places I like to take the guests for the holidays I lead when I go to Stratford for my Just Shakespeare holiday. Hence the picture of the ham acting in the schoolroom on the slide below, bottom left. That's very ham acting. What he did when he left school is still unknown. Did he work with his father in his glove shop? Did he travel to Lancashire to work with John Cottam, a teacher and Catholic at the home of the de Horton family in Horton Towers near Blackburn? Did he go down to London to sell wool illegally as his father had done? Was he forced to leave because he had offended the big landowners, the Lucy family, by poaching and then posting some insulting verses above the gates, which is one of the stories? Did he join a travelling theatre company, the Queen's Men, when one of their members had been killed in a duel in a village nearby? We simply don't know and can only guess. The book Hamnet has him falling out with his father and wanting to get away, and he goes down to sell gloves, and that's how he gets into the theatre. But what we do know, dates what we do know are 1582, 1583 and 1585. We do know when he married, which was 1582, in Temple Grafton, the small church above. And when his children were born, 1583, Suzanne or Susanna, and 1585, the twins Judith and Hamnet. Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, no, not the one pictured above, that's the film star, was 8 years his senior in 1582. In fact, throughout all his life, she was 8 years his senior, now I think about it. They married when he was 18, and Hathaway, who was around 3 months pregnant, was 26. The story of Anne Hathaway, though, is told beautifully in the book by Maggie O'Farrell called Hamnet. It gives a fictional but convincing account of Shakespeare's marriage and young family. Well, on the right-hand side, we get the 19th century engraving of Shakespeare entertaining his family. So it's 19th century German engraving. He's just returned to Stratford from London, and he's surrounded by them. So in the background, you've got his parents, John and Mary. You've got the twins, Hamnet and Judith, stand in front and behind him. And next to her, Anne Hathaway, Anne Hathaway's seated there, while the teenage Susanna kneels at his feet. Now, when he was only 11 years old, Hamnet died of the plague. 4 or so years later, Shakespeare began writing Hamlet. In the same way that in some parts of Lancashire, you hear people describe a chimney as a chimley, it's likely that Hamnet may also have been pronounced with an L. Maggie Farrell's book, though, is well worth reading if you want to see how this affected the playwright. Shakespeare now working away from his family in London, though you have to look no further than the play he wrote at this time, a play called King John. In the play, the death of the child Arthur, King John's nephew, is described in the words of Constance, his mother. And some of the most touching lines in Shakespeare, I think, particularly when you realise he could be at this time thinking about his own son who has just died. If I may, I shall read it to you, a short bit. Arthur has been pushed off the battlements and murdered on the orders of his uncle, King John. And Constance, his mother, reflects on his death like this. Grief fills the room up of my absent child, lies in his bed, walks up and down with me, puts on his pretty looks, repeats his words, remembers me of all his gracious parts, stuffs out his vacant garments with his form. Then have I reason to be fond of grief? Fare you well. Had you such a loss as I could give better comfort than you do. I will not keep this form upon my head when there's such disorder in my wit. O Lord, my boy, my Arthur, my fair son, my life, my joy, my food, my all the world, my widow comfort and my sorrow's cure. And I think that's probably as relevant today for anybody who's lost a child as it would have been in Shakespeare's time. So that was the fourth age of Shakespeare. And if you haven't read Hamlet, I recommend you do. The fifth age takes us to London, because we do know that he's in London and making a name for himself in 1592. even if we don't know what happened to him during the lost years. So by then he's a playwright, and you see that the theatres in the south of the river in front of you. And we know he's making a name for himself because this guy, this is Robert Greene, who you may recognize from Upstart Crow. There was a subtle reference made to him in a piece of writing, supposedly a last word and testament sort of writing. So it was supposed to be taken seriously, although he then went on to write another one from Robert Greene, who was one of the university-educated playwrights who resented this young upstart who was putting his nose out by having all his plays being watched. What he wrote was this, and it's up there on the screen. For there is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country. Now, it's clearly a reference to Shakespeare, not only because of the pun on his name at the end, but also because of the parodying reference to a tiger's heart wrapped in a woman's hide, which was a line from his history trilogy of Henry VI plays, which was taking the London theatres by storm. The picture is, of course, of the actor playing Robert Greene in David Mitchell's Shakespeare comedy called Upstart Crow. The line from Henry VI, by the way, is "She wolf of France, but worse than wolves of France, whose tongue more poisonous than the adder's tooth, O tiger's heart, wrapped in a woman's hide." And I must say, that I've become quite a Shakespeare fan, and go and see everything I can at Stratford. It's my spiritual home, a bit like Blackpool, really. I do think it's a wonderful place to go to. Oh, and you can, on occasion, have 3 plays on the same day. So I've seen the Henry VI trilogy on the same day, morning, afternoon, and evening, and you come out speaking in blank verse. It's great fun. Anyway, 1592. Let's move on. Although scholars find it difficult to date Shakespeare's plays, most would agree that by 1592, when Robert Greene said what he did, Shakespeare had written The Taming of the Shrew, the 3 parts of Henry VI, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Titus Andronicus, and Richard III. By the end of his career, he would write 30 more and collaborate on others. Another key date in his life was 1599, when he became a part owner of the New Globe Theatre, which was erected on the south bank of the Thames, with timbers dismantled in the middle of the night and carried across the Thames from another theatre called the Theatre, following a dispute over ownership. And this is the Sam Wanamaker's Globe, erected near the site of the original. In Shakespeare's time, at Southwark, it was an area of bear-baiting pits and brothels. But this was opened in 2014, when there were no brothels or bear pits there. The book, again, on the right-hand side, is again by the American James Shapiro, and it's called 1599, A Year in the Life of William Shakespeare. And again, it's well worth a read. His plays were written in the reigns of 2 monarchs, Shakespeare's plays. He was born 6 years after Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558. She seemed to enjoy his plays because he performed at court, but he and his company almost fell foul of her when the Earl of Essex paid for a performance of Richard II about the justifiable usurpation of a monarch. And of course, he and his followers were arrested and executed. And in those days, Shakespeare was lucky not to get his nose slit or his ears cut off. And certainly another playwright, Ben Jonson, was imprisoned for something less than that. Anyway, although Hamlet was written a little earlier, his greatest tragedies were written during the reign of James I, who came to the throne in 1603. So Measure for Measure, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra were all written in the early years of James I's reign. And all those plays there, Hamlet, as I say, was a little earlier. The most important play, perhaps, is this one, though, I think, Macbeth. Superstitious actors like to call it the Scottish play. And it feels like a play that was written specifically for the first Scottish king to take the English throne, James I. James was interested in witchcraft. He had personally interrogated Agnes Sampson, a woman accused of witchcraft, and he'd written a treatise on demonology. and was perhaps even more interested in the gunpowder plot, which almost killed him. And there are references to this in the dire combustion and confused events, which is a line from the play, and in the advice that Lady Macbeth gives to her husband, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it, a direct reference to a medal struck to commemorate the gunpowder plot. Having taught Macbeth for years, I could quote huge chunks of it. I once taught Macbeth in a rural South African school, Umbu Senior Secondary School, where there were 7 books between 40 pupils. And Shakespeare can be difficult at first, but it's even more difficult, I can tell you, if it's in a foreign language, as it was to these students whose first language was Xhosa, and has to be read upside down because you have to share the texts. And Shakespeare wrote histories, comedies, and tragedies, but his final plays, which combine elements of all 3, are classified as romances. These have a special place for me, as my first undergraduate dissertation was about kingship in the last 3 plays of Shakespeare, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. Over the years, I've seen hundreds of performances of Shakespeare plays. So, as I said, the RSC at Stratford is like Bloomfield Road, something of a spiritual home. But of all the performances of The Tempest I ever saw, the one I produced for a Year 9 group as their entry for the Shakespeare Schools Festival in 2009, which is the picture on the left, must go down as my favourite. They did it so well. And the one on the right is a professional performance at the RSC. I may have already mentioned, though, that for me, the most important production must be Franco Zeffirelli's film version of
Alban, just before you carry on, we'll play the a bit of music here.
Okay.
And it'll just give you a chance to extol your love for Olivia Hussey, having heard the music.
I will continue staring at her while you play the music.
Yeah. Isn't that just stunning? Really. You may notice, if you're a keen listener to the radio, there was a really famous radio show with Simon Bates on called Our Tune, or something like that. And if you listen carefully, that's where we got the music from. The melody near the end. Yeah. Did you recognise it, Brian? Yeah. Oh, hold on, Brian. You're muted at the moment. Just unmute. Sorry, mate. It's handy when the main speaker's speaking, but did you recognise it?
Yeah, I reckon I've heard that music before.
Yeah.
But I didn't make the link with what
Yeah.
you said with that Simon.
And also, didn't the fellow who wrote Withnail and I, did he have a row with Zeffirelli, Alban? Is that, have I read something?
I don't know that story.
You know the famous film Withnail and I?
Oh, it's an amazing film.
It's a really clever film, yeah. There's a reference in it to Shakespeare. And it's allegedly based on the fact that Bruce, whatever his name is, that wrote Withnail and I, Bruce Robinson, I think, wasn't it, went to meet Zeffirelli, and apparently Zeffirelli wasn't very nice to him. So he wrote something about, not liking Shakespeare. Yeah. So you have to watch Withnail and I one night now.
Oh, it's a brilliant film.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, so Alban, Olivia Hussey and Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. I mean, obviously you'll have seen that version and many others. I mean, is that still for you one go-to?
It is. I see lots of Shakespeare plays, and the most recent one, Baz Luhrmann, the Romeo plus Juliet. I thought it was okay, but Zeffirelli for me still does it. I just think it's beautiful choreography, it's beautiful music, it's lovely young actors. And one of the things about watching Romeo and Juliet on the stage is you have to have the chemistry between the two actors.
Mm.
So when I came to write my master's degree, I chose a scene from Romeo and Juliet to do it because of that. And I followed a particular, I think it was 2010 production, where the chemistry was good between the two actors.
I mean, it's a bit like Pyramus and Thisbe, isn't it? It harks back to the, the old Greek tragedy, really.
The idea of love is at its most pure if you're going to die because of it.
Yeah. But isn't it based on a like a roughly true story from about 100 years earlier? Actually, it's Verona, isn't it? The city.
It's set in Verona. Yeah, there are various.
But in the real life one, I think the fella that was in love with the girl had his head chopped off, so he came to quite a nasty end. I think I'm pretty sure I read about it when I was doing a little bit of research earlier. But it was adapted by a couple of people before Shakespeare got hold of it, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, the man called Brooke wrote a poem. Yeah. But I mean, for me, it's beautiful in this production, but it's a great play for teenagers to watch, I think, and to get them into Shakespeare. And parents watching it, parents of teenagers will recognise the conflict between Lord Capulet and Juliet. I might, if I may, just read you a bit of that. Can I do that?
Yeah, please do. I'll just let me just spotlight you so you're nice and big for the screen. There we go.
Okay.
On mute. Do you want me to go on mute?
Yeah, if we all go on mute while Alban does his.
Yeah, I thought so.
Thank you.
Okay, so Romeo and Juliet is about young love. The two of them have fallen in love secretly and married. The son of the father's worst enemy. So Juliet's a Capulet and Romeo's a Montague, and they fall in love with each other. And when Lord Capulet doesn't find out, but he arranges for a marriage with Paris. Now Paris is a good match because he's a relative of the prince. And when Juliet tells him, "No, thanks, Dad," the father of all family rows ensues, and these are Capulet's words to his teenage daughter, which I've always liked. I used to call my daughter baggage because of this. I'm sure it's psychologically damaged her for life. Hang thee, young baggage disobedient wretch, he says, when she says no. I tell thee what, get thee to church a Thursday, or never have to look me in the face. Speak not, reply not, do not answer me, my fingers itch. And then the nurse and his wife intervene and try and hold him back before he finishes her off. And he carries on saying, God's blooded blood, it makes me mad. Day, night, hour, tide, time, work, play, alone in company, still my care the been to have her matched. And having now provided a gentleman of noble parentage, of fair domains, youthful and nobly trained, stuffed, as they say, with honourable parts, proportioned as one's thought would be a man. And then to have a wretched, puling fool, a whining mammet in her fortune's tender, to answer, I'm not wed, I cannot love, I am too young, I pray you pardon me. But an you will not wed, I'll pardon you. Graze where you will, you shall not house with me. Look to it, think on it. I do not use to jest. Thursday is near. Lay hand on heart, advise, and you be mine. I'll give you to my friend, and you be not. Hang, beg, starve, die in the streets, for by my soul I'll never acknowledge thee, nor what is mine shall ever do thee good. Trust to it. Bethink you, I'll not be forsworn. And then he goes off. Shall I give you the last two lives of Big Bill?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, shall I share my screen?
Yeah.
So I'd have to look at myself. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a beautiful...
Is that better?
It is, yeah. And there's Capulet on the left.
And was it Michael York played one of the Tybalts? Yeah.
Great parts. Anyway, he's got 7 lives. We're on number 6 already. So Shakespeare's final years were spent back in Stratford with his wife and his daughters in a big house, the second biggest house in Stratford, which he had bought for them on the profits he had made from his plays. This is the subject of the recent film All Is True, with Anne Hathaway looking remarkably like Judi Dench and Shakespeare like a heavily disguised Kenneth Branagh. Anne Hathaway would outlive him by 7 years. His daughter Susanna, pictured there, would make a good marriage with the doctor, John Hall, who Shakespeare trusted and who therefore did well out of his will. Judith, on the other hand, the twin, had made a bad marriage to a Thomas Quiney, a vintner of Stratford-upon-Avon, who got another girl pregnant, who subsequently died giving birth, and so was cut out of Shakespeare's will. And Judith is buried somewhere in Holy Trinity Church, but we don't know where. And he died on the 23rd of April, 1616, at the age of 52, reputably after a heavy drinking bout. And he's buried near the high altar of Holy Trinity Church, a beautiful location on the River Avon. And that's inside Holy Trinity Church, where his grave is, and the closest members of his family, but not Judith. And we don't know where Hamnet was buried either, presumably in a pauper's grave or in a plague victim's grave. She died much later, did Judith, and she's buried in the grounds of Holy Trinity, but not in a marked grave. Over the Shakespeare grave is the famous curse, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust and close it here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." And in his will, Susanna did best out of Shakespeare's, the whole of Shakespeare's family. She got a big chunk of it, but famously, Anne Hathaway was left his second best bed. This may not be the insult it at first seems to be, as the best bed would have been kept for guests, and the second best would have been their marital bed. So maybe it was a romantic gesture. The poet laureate, until recently, Carol Ann Duffy, wrote a lovely sonnet suggesting, it's called Anne Hathaway, I won't read it, but it is a lovely sonnet. Shakespeare had bought his family the second biggest house in Stratford, and this was still to be standing in the 18th century, but it's not there today. By the 1700s, Shakespeare's name was drawing more and more curious visitors to the town. In his garden, there was a mulberry tree, which literary tourists would keep on breaking pieces off as souvenirs. They also spent a lot of time peering in through the windows. Now, by this stage, the house had been sold to the Reverend Francis Gaskell, a spiteful and grumpy old owner who eventually had enough of all these tourists and cut the mulberry tree down. In retaliation, the local populace, who were by then making good money out of Shakespeare's many followers, broke his windows. And in a fit of pique and spite, the Reverend Gaskell had the house pulled down. This was 1759, when he was only 6 years after he bought it. He was so unpopular, he had to leave town. He couldn't stay. Nevertheless, the site today and its beautiful gardens can be visited. So again, highly recommended. And you see the sculpture, which is there now on the left-hand side. It's been they did some archaeological digs and didn't find very much, but they've revamped the garden. And the seventh age of Shakespeare is the legacy he's left, because Shakespeare, as you know, is all around us. And here, for example, is an advert for Coca-Cola. No need for words. Everybody recognizes that's Romeo and Juliet, and Coca-Cola have bought into that. And of course, he's good for selling beer as well. Everyone thinks that they know what Shakespeare looks like. So you've got British beer in the middle, flowers, and then you've got the American beer on either side. The line reads, "Someone has been on the Shakespeare." Everybody likes a bad pun. Or there's this one, which I'm sure you can fill in the gaps. Everybody knows some of Shakespeare's famous lines. So here's Stella Artois tapping into everyone's familiarity with Hamlet's famous soliloquy. So you know it's going to be 2 beers or not. Oh, never mind. Or there's this cough mixture. Now, this is actually from Brazil. So it's in English, but it's from Brazil, where they speak Portuguese. But so famous are the words of Shakespeare's soliloquy given to Hamlet that they can put to cough or not to cough. That's the cough cough, and everybody recognizes it. Or there's this one. This one is from Germany. So it's not just the English-speaking world. An advertisement for a German printing firm. So if there weren't printers, Shakespeare would be driving a tractor. I won't hurt your, well, perhaps I will hurt your ears with my German. Was wäre Shakespeare ohne Buchdruck? Which I think means, where would Shakespeare be without a printer? Or there's this one. I mean, we can't advertise cigars like this anymore, but I do like this one because I think it's quite subtle. It's a subtle reference to Hamlet, the name of the cigar, as the prince who's been turned into a frog. So it's there in the advertising world, it's all around us, but it's there in our language as well. Everything what we say has some, or lots of things we say have references to Shakespeare. He's supposed to have introduced something like 1,700 new words, or at least they were first recorded in his plays. Words like bedroom, A Midsummer Night's Dream, birthplace, Coriolanus, bloodstained, Titus Andronicus, cold-blooded, King John, dishearten, King Henry V, deafening, Henry IV, drugged, Macbeth, fashionable, Troilus and Cressida, sanctimonious, measure for measure. They're all there from Shakespeare first recording them. Without Shakespeare, we wouldn't have eyeballs, first mentioned in A Midsummer Night's Dream. We wouldn't have hobnobs, my favorite chocolate biscuit. A hob is a kettle, and where a kettle is being boiled and where friends gather together to share a drink. And sometimes they'd warm the drink, they'd have warm beer or cold beer. And that's why a hobnob is all about gathering together. And that's why it's a chocolate biscuit. And there are phrases we use, like what the Dickens is, actually comes from Shakespeare rather than Dickens. Laughing stock, for goodness sake. You couldn't say good riddance were it not for Shakespeare. You couldn't say a tower of strength, dead as a doornail, elbow room, well behaved, wild goose chase, a foregone conclusion, in a pickle, or even one fell swoop. And it is wonderful for quoting. Lines like these are familiar to everybody. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, from Hamlet. This above all else to thine own self be true. Again, Hamlet. Friends, Romans and countrymen, lend me your ears, from Julius Caesar. But for mine part, it was Greek to me, from Julius Caesar again. The course of true love never did run smooth, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Which means not where are you, but why are you called Romeo, not something else? And exit pursued by a bear, which isn't on there, from The Winter's Tale, is also great for insults. So if you want to insult somebody, you can call them, you can say to them, "The devil damn thee, black thou cream-faced loon, where gottest thou that goose look," from Macbeth. If you don't think that's strong enough, you can give them a bit of King Lear. "Thou art a boil, a plague sore, an embossed carbuncle in my corrupted blood." Or if you want to have the first mum joke, this is from Titus Andronicus, where he says, "Villain, I have done thy mother," which isn't very nice. And the chef's hat is there, of course, because it's a good play about cannibalism, and it's got lots of gore in it. Or if you want to tell somebody be quiet, more of your conversation would infect my brain, it would probably be a good line for that. But Francesca may well be interested in having some romantic stuff in the cards she writes. So here's a few of those. "When you do dance, I wish you were a wave of the sea, that you might ever do nothing but that," which is from The Winter's Tale. Or this is from The Comedy of Errors about twins, but it could apply to any romantic relationship. "I to the world am like a drop of water that in the ocean seeks another drop." Or for people who are married, "You are my true and honourable wife." This might come in useful if you're trying to make up something you said, or want to get get round your wife. "You are my true and honourable wife, as dear to me as are the ruddy drops that visit my sad heart." Or this one, which is actually my favourite, because I'd like to say that every day when I came home from work or from leading one of my holidays, Ronnie, my wife, would embrace me, give me a kiss, and greet me with these words. She'd say, "Lord of Lords, O infinite virtue, comest thou smiling from the world's great snare uncaught." And that's from Antony and Cleopatra. Actually, she didn't, but I'm still working on it. One day she might. And then there are the sonnets. I won't read the whole sonnet, but my favourite is probably 29, the one which begins, "When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state," and ends with the lines quoted there, "For thy sweet love remembered much such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings." Really, really romantic stuff. And as we're getting to the end, we should also be aware that I'm not the only fan of Big Bill Shakespeare. Not the only one who thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. Not one of his expressions, I think, or since Bloomfield Road. When in the days of apartheid, Nelson Mandela and his fellow ANC members were imprisoned on Robben Island, they were only allowed to read religious books. So a copy of the complete works of Shakespeare was smuggled into the prison disguised as a Hindu religious text and passed around the prisoners so that they can mark their favourite passages. This is the text chosen by Nelson Mandela himself, one of the great men of the 20th century. "Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. And who are we to argue with that, I ask?" And finally, the plays. He wrote comedies, tragedies, histories. The comedies are still funny today. Falling in Love with Donkey is quite funny. Othello has got played in that production by the beautiful actress whose name escapes me, and Olivia playing the history play Richard III. And if I were to end the presentation, I'd do it with a bit from one of his monologues, and this one by Henry V is one of my favourites, probably well chosen for St. George's Day. The picture shows Kenneth Branagh and Brian Blessed. You could probably still hear him now in the 1989 film, and Laurence Olivier in the 1944 film. Now, when Laurence Olivier directed that, he dedicated it to the commandos and airborne troops before D-Day, the spirit of whose ancestors it's been humbly attempted to capture, he said. It's a little long, so I can leave you with the closing words, or you can have the whole thing.
Do the whole thing, Alban, please. Yeah.
Okay, then yeah. I'll be self-indulgent and give you the whole bit. It's before the Battle of Agincourt, and he's surrounded by his troops, and he's received news that the French are stronger than he is. And there are those who say that they should wait until reinforcements arrive. And King Henry replies that we don't need more troops to defeat the French. We just need to be ourselves. And this is what he says. Oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when the day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Essex, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that shed blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whilst any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. And inspired by the speech, of course, they go on and win Agincourt.
Wonderful. Absolutely superb, mate.
So
what we're going to do is Alban tipped me the wink about something he'd seen on YouTube by a young rap poet called Kate Tempest. So if you're watching still on Facebook, I hope that you're going to get to see this and enjoy it, because this just shows what you can do if you play around with something. So this is Kate Tempest doing her poem My Shakespeare.
He's in every lover who ever stood alone beneath a window, and every jealous whispered word, and every ghost that will not rest. He's in every father with a favourite, every eye that stops to linger on what someone else has got and starts to widen in distress. He's in every young man that grows boastful, every worn-out elder drunk for days, muttering false prophecies and squandering their lot. He's in every complex misunderstanding that springs up between a group of friends and never seems to end, even when its beginnings are forgot. He's in every girl who ever used her wits to outsmart the status quo. He's in every vain self-admirer, every passionate, ambitious social climber. He's in every misheard word that ever led to tempers fraying. He's in every pawn that moves across the board and still remains convinced that it's not playing. So you might think his words are ancient, you might think his words are dead, but chances are you've quoted him directly if you've ever said, oh, it sets my teeth on edge, or there's a method in my madness, or pure as the driven snow, or my hair's standing on end, or all that glitters is not gold, or I haven't slept a wink, or I wear my heart upon my sleeve, or the beast with two backs, or the word puking, which is harder to believe, or fighting fire with fire, or having too much of a good thing. You see, his pen was mightier than his sword, but still his words are like blades that sing our very names when they strike. Here's the milk of human kindness, up in arms, break the ice. Here's the green-eyed monster. His discretion is the better part of valor. And now his words with their arms around each other's shoulders swagger to the ends of their phrases. They're proud of everything they've done, of how his pages have lasted through the ages, of how he has become a poet whose poetics have embedded themselves so firmly in the fabric of our language it's like he's in our mouths. His words have tangled round our own and given rise to expressions so effective in expressing how we feel, we can't imagine how we'd feel without them. He's less the tights and garters, more the sons demanding answers from the absence of their fathers, the hot darkness of a doomed embrace, the laughter of the night before, the tightened jaw of the morning after. He is in us, part and parcel of our royals and our rascals. He's not just something boring taught in classrooms in language that's hard to understand. He's not just a feeling of inadequacy when you sit for an exam. He's in every valiant woman, every pitiful villain, every sore loser, every great king, every fake tear. And his legacy exists and lives on in everything he's written. And if you listen, you will hear him everywhere. He's my Shakespeare.
Wow. How cool is that? How good was that?
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I enjoyed
Lovely, isn't
that.
it?
George, you'll have to show that to your lot, won't you?
I will. That's brilliant. That.
Definitely every teacher should be sharing that, Alban.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Just how well she can put all those words together. And, you know, in a way, that's is poetry, is
Yeah, it was
Shakespeare.
good. I took the words out of my mouth. That was
Yeah.
poetry as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyway, Alban, that was superb. Hopefully, well, George is enjoying himself, and hopefully Harry, who's kept himself quiet and hiding away, has picked up a little bit there, and anyone out there as well.
Not my Harry. Not my Harry.
Isn't it not? No,
No,
it's, no, it's another Harry. Well,
Oh, is it? Because
well,
he's watching as well.
okay. The thing earlier, I wish I'd dug out some of the music actually, because have you seen Prospero's books? The
Yes,
Michael
yeah.
Neiman scored Peter Greenaway film. So
Yeah.
what did you make of that then?
Well, I think it was of its time, wasn't it? I mean, you often see a film and think it's was it 80s or 90s it came out?
Late 80s or early
Yeah,
90s?
Yeah, and it was interesting. I've seen quite a few Tempests. There was one with a female lead as Prospero rather than Prospero. I thought
Okay.
was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously back in the day, I mean, all the female parts were played by men who probably...
yeah.
Now, did they shave their beards off, Alban? This is the question we need to ask.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they have clean shaven blokes playing the female part. So you and
I should
Brian
hope so.
would not be able to play Juliet. You'd have to have been fight to be
Yeah.
Romeo between you, wouldn't you?
I'd just have a shave.
You just have a shave, yeah.
Not real. This is not real. This is not. I'll take this off before I go to bed.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Anyway, so we're going to play another song, and George, if you've got to scoot off and do family matters, please do.
I'll have to. In a
We will
minute.
see you either next week or the week after in passing. And now the weather's nice, I'm going to drop you and Julia a call, and we'll go for a walk down on yonder beach.
Sounds good.
I think it's warm enough to be allowed out in in little swaths of time now. But thank you for joining in tonight. And
Well, thank you, Alban. That was
Next week,
absolutely
the week
amazing.
Wasn't it? Absolutely. I
Learned
loved all
loads.
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love the character where you went into.
that's what we want, isn't it? People to gain a bit of knowledge, have a bit of fun, share some nice stories, and hopefully enjoy the music. I'm going to play Baz Luhrmann, Alban. And now, you might remember his valedictory speech when he graduated from high school, and it's pretty apt because the weather's improved, and we all must wear sunscreen.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of '99, wear sunscreen. If I could offer you only one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it. The long-term benefits of sunscreen have been proved by scientists, whereas the rest of my advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience. I will dispense this advice now. Enjoy the power and beauty of your youth. Oh, never mind. You will not understand the power and beauty of your youth until they've faded. But trust me, in 20 years, you'll look back at photos of yourself and recall in a way you can't grasp now how much possibility lay before you and how fabulous you really looked. You are not as fat as you imagine. Don't worry about the future, or worry, but know that worrying is as effective as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubblegum. The real troubles in your life are apt to be things that never crossed your worried mind, the kind that blindsides you at 4 p.m. on some idle Tuesday. Do one thing every day that scares you. Sing. Don't be reckless with other people's hearts. Don't put up with people who are reckless with yours. Floss. Don't waste your time on jealousy. Sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're behind. The race is long, and in the end, it's only with yourself. Remember compliments you receive. Forget the insults. If you succeed in doing this, tell me how. Keep your old love letters. Throw away your old bank statements. Stretch. Don't feel guilty if you don't know what you want to do with your life. The most interesting people I know didn't know at 22 what they wanted to do with their lives. Some of the most interesting 40-year-olds I know still don't. Get plenty of calcium. Be kind to your knees. You'll miss them when they're gone. Maybe you'll marry, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll have children, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll divorce at 40. Maybe you'll dance the funky chicken on your 75th wedding anniversary. Whatever you do, don't congratulate yourself too much, or berate yourself either. Your choices are half chance. So are everybody else's. Enjoy your body. Use it every way you can. Don't be afraid of it or what other people think of it.
It's rather great, isn't it, actually? And look after your knees because you'll miss them when they're gone or something. I know that feeling because I've got a sore knee. Even though I go out walking every Sunday, I'm still end up coming home feeling like I've come a cropper somehow. Yeah. But no, it's great, that, isn't it? There was another piece that you suggested that we play as well. The V-Day.
Vide Cor Meum.
Yeah.
Which is in Hannibal, the murderer, and it's also in the Kingdom of Heaven. And I think I don't know what I mentioned earlier. I used that when I did the two Shakespeare Schools festivals, the Tempest and Romeo and Juliet. I always use that soundtrack because I particularly liked it.
Well, we shall play that in a minute. But before we came on air or on Facebook, whichever, tonight, Brian, were you telling us you've yet again written a new poem? Have you got a new poem for us?
Well, it's not like Alban does. I mean, he's a professional. I just mess about. But yeah,
nothing wrong with that, mate. Nothing wrong with that.
It's only a silly one. It's a silly one. Okay, shall I read it?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay. We both made love at the kitchen sink while you were drinking your glass of wine. Then we took our love to the kitchen floor, and then we heard a knock at the door. It was a scramble, a preamble from every angle, and we both giggled trying to get to our feet. The face at the window gave us both a shock. It was Nora, who lived down the street. She looked through the window with her eyes all aglow as we pulled our clothes off the chair. The chair fell over, and so did we. And Nora saw us with our bums in the air. So the moral of this poem is, just have fun, strip off, and go and dance in the rain.
That's fabulous, mate.
A simple one.
Look, simple works, doesn't it? I mean, that's the thing. Alban, do you remember the other day? You know the poet Brian Bilston. Do you follow him on Twitter or Facebook?
Yes.
Yeah. He did a poem about the life of Shakespeare told through his plays. Did you print it out, or shall I print it out and read it?
You print it out and read it.
Okay, well, we'll just quickly throw on that bit of music that you were talking about. So I've mixed up which film they were from. The Salve Regina I thought was from Hannibal, but it's the Vide Cor Meum then.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a version of Salve Regina in Zeffirelli's.
In the Zeffirelli, yeah.
And obviously
yeah,
a bit
yeah.
further on than you bit you played.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll have a bit of.
Lovely anyway.
We'll have a lovely bit of Vide Cor Meum while I go and delve for the Brian Bilston.
Yeah, And just tell me, Young Hearts Run Free, is yeah, that's not Candy Staton then?
No, it's the version that was used in the Romeo and Juliet
I
rework,
see,
and it's
right.
it's in the soundtrack
Right.
of the Romeo plus Juliet.
Yeah.
Because he reworked lots of famous
Yeah.
songs, didn't he? Which was quite clever, really. So yeah, we'll end on that in a few minutes. Time.
Yeah.
Love Fool by the Cardigans.
Why
My
not?
favourites. So let's have a minute or two of V-Day while I find the Brian Bilston.
Your sound's going in and out, by the way, so.
That is lovely, isn't it? I hope you were humming along there, Brian.
Well, I was quietly to myself in my head.
Oh, there's some lovely music it's a shame with popular radio, for want of a word, that they don't find time to bring in music like that. You know, we're all in favour of listening to Buddy Holly and the Beatles and Duran Duran and Queen and whatever, but you know, I do wish sometimes they played a bit of classical music and a bit of jazz and such like. It would be a good thing. Now, Brian Bilston, just going back, the other day, Shakespeare's birthday, Brian Bilston, who is a brilliant poet, I think he's a Yorkshire chap, he's written a piece called The Very Condensed Shakespeare. A terrible storm rages, and two gentlemen, one a Venetian merchant, the other a Trojan prince, are washed up on the shores of the Forest of Arden, where Angelo is chased off by a bear wearing yellow stockings. The prince, who calls himself Falstaff, but whose real name is Beatrice, encounters Puck, a fairy-like shrew, who enchants the woods to march on the nearby hamlet of Dunsinane. There, Falstaff encounters a passing, traitorous Roman senator, who tells him of a blind, hunchbacked tyrant named Henry VI, ruler of 3 parts of the kingdom, alongside Henry IV, 2 parts, Henry V, Henry VIII, a couple of Richards, and John, who have 1 part each. The king, fearful of a merger between powerful rival families, has abducted 2 star-crossed teenagers and cooked them in a pie. On his way to avenge these crimes, Falstaff falls in love with a shepherdess called Goneril, but who is really Antophanes, eldest son of Henry VI, and woos her through the recital of 154 sonnets. Upon reaching the court, Falstaff takes advantage of the disloyalty of Henry's general Iago to overthrow the king, who runs away to a cave and kills himself by asp. Goneril succeeds to the throne, and Falstaff becomes his queen after a joyful double wedding with Angelo and the yellow-stockinged bear, who have also fallen in love, just as the witches had prophesied, and all's well that ends well. It's really clever, isn't it? Because I mean, he works in parts of plots and parts of plays, and as a little play, of his own as well. It's I mean, he is seriously clever. If you're on Twitter and Facebook, track him down and have a look through the stuff he does. It's like the word of the day that Susie Dent comes out with every day that I'm sure Alban retweets, because she does seem to spot a word that mirrors what's been going on in current politics and football and such like. Anyway, must commiserate you, Alban. 16 matches unbeaten, and you lose 1-0 at home.
Well, they've lost the last two. And
is it two now?
They play Sunderland tomorrow night as well.
That's the big one, isn't it? Because Sunderland
away at Sunderland.
Well.
So it's
Brian, if you don't know, if you've not missed, Alban's a Blackpool fan.
I do know that.
And he's actually booked tickets to
Wembley.
Go to Wembley for May the 18th or whenever the playoffs are. Yeah. I think you're just about there, aren't you? I think one more win would probably do, wouldn't it?
Probably two will make it certain. But,
because there was a period up until you've lost these two games, you were just about.
Yeah, the players look very tired at the moment.
I think no matter what we think of football and what some of them get paid, when you go down a couple of leagues like the league Blackpool are in, and Tranmere and people, it must be hard, the way things have been for them for this last season. But
I always say that the three pillars of my life are Shakespeare, Blackpool, and the family, not necessarily in that order.
I was going to say you need to put your Trinity in order, don't you?
That's true.
Yeah, but no, thank you very much for
sorry about that.
A blast of the bar tonight. That was great fun.
Because you mentioned Wembley.
Football.
Because you mentioned Wembley.
What's that then? Wembley Stadium, yeah.
Yeah, a football from when the towers with the towers on it. It's an old
the original Twin Towers, yeah.
Yeah. It's an old one.
So it's the Tolkien version of the Wembley Ball.
I don't know. But it's just it's not blown up properly.
No. So what was that a game you went to? Did you go see?
No.
Game? No.
I just acquired it years and years ago. About 30 years ago, I think.
Yeah, God. Well, yeah, because they're gone now. The Twin Towers, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. You went for a long time ago.
Yeah. So
you were just talking about Shakespeare.
Oh, go on.
Yeah. With do you remember the series that was on Sex in the City?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Kim Cattrall.
Local girl.
Yeah, that's it. A local girl. Well, Francesca loves her. She loved that series, and she was in Othello.
She's a proper. Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of these people are genuinely great actresses and actors. Yeah. They just end up making popular, commercial stuff, don't they?
Yeah. That's it. Well, Francesca wanted to go and see her Little Idol at that time, so we went, and we were just couple of rows back from the stage, so she was like there. So it was
apparently she's a nice person. I mean, I put something up on Twitter as you do a while ago, and she was genuinely one of the people who retweeted it for me, which is bizarre to think how a Hollywood actress sees something that some bloke in Liverpool tweets.
Yeah.
But someone must have passed it on. She thought that makes sense, and I got a retweet off her.
Well, she might just get in touch with this program now. We're talking about.
You just never know, do you? You just never know.
Another thing, when I was in Hope Uni, I did a thing on Shakespeare. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if I did. I talked to somebody, and we all had to pick something that we wanted to do. And I picked Shakespeare at the time, and I wanted to make a model of the Globe Theatre.
Wow.
but I didn't tell anyone. And you had to work with a group, and the other group, the group I was with, were just drinking. They were younger people, and that's all they wanted to do, go out. And so they never did any presentation other than having a flipboard and writing a few words on, and that's all he'd done. But I used to stay behind till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. The security kept on coming and saying, Brian, you've got to go home. I've got to lock up. And I'd say, I'm just doing it, just doing it. And I never told them what I was doing. But I made a Globe Theatre. It was like quite big. And also I made a Victorian theatre, right? Now the Globe Theatre, I went around the grounds of Hope University and I looked for bits of twigs, bits of anything, because I couldn't afford to buy anything. But I completed it with cardboard and PVA and straw and sawdust and everything. I even put the little lift, because I think they had a lift there. That,
They did.
I made that where you had to pull the rope down, and that used to go up. And I made it as a pie with the section out, so you could see inside it. You could see all the seats all around it.
All the rich people went up in the top tier, didn't they?
Yeah, that's it. And I did, you know, like your four-poster bed, your pillars on the stage. I put sawdust on the floor. I put cutouts and everything for people watching. And it turned out, boss.
Oh, fantastic.
And when I did the presentation, the other students, you know, in the group say, Brian, have you done anything? Because you used to say, why'd you stay behind when I like it?
Yeah.
You know. But when it came to the day, I covered everything with the big plastic bags. And I just walked in, I waited for my turn. And then I did my little piece. And then I just went with the plastic bag off the Globe. And I remember my lecturer, the art guy, and he went like that. And I've never forgot his jaw dropped.
Yeah.
And that's
Brilliant.
It was worth its weight in gold.
Oh, lovely, fine, lovely.
Right.
It's life enhancing, is it, when you can find something like that?
Well, the end of that, I got great grades and stuff.
Yeah.
But the best thing for me at the end, when all the classes were all starting to leave, because there was all different classes there, he come over and he put his arm around me, the lecturer, and he went, Brian, he said, can you do me a favour? And I went, what? And he picked the Victorian Theatre that he wanted to do. He said, can I keep that in my office? He said, to show them how it should be done. And I didn't even have to think. And I just said, yeah, okay. Because I made it with all sections and it was long, you know, and you could look inside it and it had all the different.
You've done quite a lot of engineering and stuff like that. You told me about some you did for a neighbour's daughter, was it? Did you make a totem pole or something, was it? Have I remembered right?
Well, yeah, with my daughter, we used to go to the people, a lady down the corner from where we lived, and we used to do on a bonfire night. She was a hairdresser, and so we used to black out all inside her salon, like we used to line it. And then I used to do all paintings, and she used to do stuff. But when it was bonfire night, she wanted to do something for bonfire night. Oh no, it wasn't bonfire night. She wanted to. Wanted to do an Indian theme. That was a big garden party at her house, parents' house. And we did everything. I made a massive Indian tent, you know, like a wigwam. I made the full wigwam, with all the Indian signs all around it, you know, and stretch hides, you know, like a beehive, buffalo hat, with those, you know, on canes, sort of stretched out. But she really wanted a totem pole, but she never really said about it. She just said, oh, I love a totem pole. I never said no more. I just picked up what she said. And I went back to mine. It took me a while to make it.
I'll bet they're pretty tall.
It was 15 foot tall, it was.
Wow.
And I made it out of card, paper mache, cane, all kinds of stuff, and big heads and faces and everything on it. And then me and my daughter carried it round to her house, and we just knocked on the door, and then she would, I don't know the right thing to say, physically challenged, is that the right thing to say? Fabulous person. And she come to the door and she went, brilliant. And we used that. We took that totem pole,
Yeah. I mean, that's the sort of thing I wish people had the time and energy to do things like that. I mean, we did papier-mâché when we were kids. And it's great fun. You used to blow a balloon up, and you'd put your paper mache, on, let it dry, burst the balloon, and then you could make masks and things. Couldn't you?
My dad taught me all stuff when I was little. But I used to make puppets, hand puppets of all the comedians and film stars.
It's an image, isn't it? It's like how Spitting Image got started. I think
I did all that. I was doing that when I was 12, 13, 14 years of age.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
But next time you're in Waterloo.
Well, I do live there, yeah.
Yeah, well, of course. But as you come down, where the St. John's School is?
Yes, I do indeed, yes.
Well, as you turn down towards Blucher Street.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, just on your left, back at the school, look at the little side road. And
the one they've put the garden in and everything.
That's it.
It's
all
gorgeous.
The gardens.
I've been meaning to take some photos of it because Seaforth, just over the hill from where I live, the people there are trying to do up the area, getting the kids out and daffodils and sunflowers and things. And they're doing a great job because it brightens everywhere up, doesn't it?
Of course it does.
Dig a bit of the mess away, dig a hole, put some water in, put some bulbs or seeds or seedlings in. So near where I live, they've been doing things. And, even though Formby's perceived as I mean, Alban and I lived and worked there. They're trying to encourage the kids to get into the village and green it up and grow things and do art in the village. As well.
It's ownership, isn't it? Is important.
Well, I remember when I was a boy, right? All the entries, between the terrace houses, were all spotless.
Oh, people took great pride, didn't they? They really did.
Every Saturday, I used to clean my backyard for my mum and dad, and clean the entry, and everyone else did.
Yeah, no, we did. I mean, when I was younger, me and my brother, we used to do neighbours' drives for them or paths. Would take stuff to the tip for them. We'd do stuff like that. I mean, unfortunately, because everybody lives in an electronic age, everyone just has things delivered and does it online, and
I know.
They really don't do things that they'd enjoy doing and would make them feel better. I mean, that song, the Baz Luhrmann song I played before, I know we don't play the full version on a Monday night. When it goes out on Thursday, the station very cleverly put the whole song in for people. But do listen to the whole song. It's full of some sensationally simple, honest advice about how we should live our lives.
Well, I put my earphones over my my mobile before to record it.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it has, but I'll listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can always pass you a CD of anything that you want to have a listen to, Bri. I mean, I've got a license to buy and play music.
That's
radio. Good. You have to have a PPL license or you get shouted at. Anyway, guys, we're going to finish as Alban spotted a song from his youth, when he used to get up and dance. But you like the Candy Staton original, was it? Was that?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, no, it was a genuine classic, wasn't it? Now, when you were saying about picking a nice song from the Baz Luhrmann Romeo plus Juliet, I had a quick look at the soundtrack and I thought, there's a few good songs here, and obviously that was one of them. Yeah. And it is a true classic, isn't it? So, Alban, thank you very, very much for tonight's presentation on the 7 Ages of Shakespeare. Hopefully anyone who's watched it has enjoyed it. If you do want anything like this doing for school, then Alban is easily contacted through myself or through Facebook.
Well.
And he's got some great presentations on Dickens, on Hardy, probably on Austen and people.
Austin Bronte. Victorians.
30, 40
you're
years as an English teacher, you know. So if you're a school or a teacher out there, and some of my friends are, and you fancy having someone zoom in and chat to the kids and give them a bit of knowledge and enthusiasm, get in touch with me. If you can't find Alban directly, I'll put you in touch. But make use of someone who knows their stuff, who's still got a passion for it and can lighten it up a bit and you know, add
I'm
something
sure that
to it.
teachers have as well. And but if I can be a bit of variety for them, then
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And of course, you know, I mean, Romeo and Juliet. If you've not seen any version of it, but I like Alban says, you know, the Franco Zeffirelli 1968/69 one is probably as good a version as any to start with, and you will cry. It's one of the saddest stories ever told, isn't it? You know, and yet there's such passion in it and romance. There's plenty of action in it. The sword fights. You know, there's political intrigue. You know, it's like the mafia done properly, isn't it? Really.
there's the teenagers round with their parents.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, the partying. Yeah, they've done more so in the remake with Leonardo DiCaprio, isn't it? And Claire Danes, is it?
Claire Danes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of schools do watch the Romeo plus Juliet version, and it is great because he brings it to a modern audience and throws in some great music. Baz Luhrmann, he is one of the better modern auteurs, isn't he? Really. Anyway, we're going to say goodbye tonight. Thank you very much. Do try and join us next Monday. Theme as yet unchosen. We will get that sorted as soon as we can. A few weeks' time, we've got Catherine Williams, and we're doing a book launch for Joseph Delaney, his new Spooks book. And we're doing a book launch for my friend Susan Brownrigg and her Madagascar pirate adventure for young readers 7 to 11. So, on the theme of young hearts run free, Kim Mazel from Romeo and Juliet.
Come on, Melbourne.
What's the sense in sharing this one and only life? Ending up just another lost and lonely wife. You count up the years and they will be filled with tears. Love only breaks up to start over again. You'll get the babies, but you won't have your man. While he is busy loving every woman that he can. Still wanna leave 100 times a day. It's easy said than done when I just can't break away. Just can't run. Young hearts, run free. Never be hung like a man. A man and me. Young hearts, to yourself be true. Don't be no fool. Love will be Said don't love you. It's high time now, just one crack at life. Who wants to live in trouble and strife? My mind must be free to learn all I can about me. I'm gonna love me for the rest of my days. Encourage the babies every time they say self-preservation.
So there we have it. It's a bit of a discoed up version, isn't it, really?
It is.
Anyway, folks, thank you very much. I'm just going to stop the recording. Thank you to everyone who's watched on Facebook. Thank you to everyone who
Thank you.
catches us on YouTube. And you can always get in touch through one of the methods of contact. And you're welcome to join us in the Zoom while we're doing them on Zoom. Still a few weeks before we get live in the studio. But, you know, for now, we're trying to have as much fun as we can on a Monday night.
And we are.
Bit of culture, bit of music, bit of chat. Thank you for tuning in. And we shall end the